Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at one of Adidas top tier racing shoes, and I said one of because they have a few, and I'll explain that here in a second. This is the Adizero Adios Pro 4. Let's break it down. Before we get started, I do want to say these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and the file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The Pro 4, the shoe here in front of me, is Adidas' more conventional super race day shoe intended for the half or full marathon. Now, it's kind of funny to say this is a more conventional shoe because this thing is a work of art. I say that because there's another level in Adidas racing shoe lineup, and the top tier super race day shoe is the Pro Evo 1, which looks very similar to the Pro 4. However, that shoe is $500. It's one of the lightest super race day shoes ever. The materials are much more minimal, thin strips of rubber, like a paper thin upper, and the foam there, while it's still technically Light Strike Pro, I think is like carved from like a single block of foam, has a whole different manufacturing method. So yes, there is another kind of top tier shoe above the Pro 4, but honestly, I think most people should probably go for this because $500 is a pretty penny to pay for a racing shoe. And then, kind of to make it a little bit more confusing, we also have the Evo SL. Now this is $150. It's one of my favorites, all-time favorite neutral daily trainers. It has the same midsole foam we saw on the Pro 3. It's still Light Strike Pro. However, according to Adidas, there's different versions of Light Strike Pro, which makes it even more confusing. However, this shoe here only has a shank or piece through the midfoot. There's no full-length plate or rods, and this is kind of more designed to be an up-tempo trainer, even though it looks very similar to the Pro 4 and even similar compared to the Pro Evo 1. So I hope that makes sense. The Evo SL is their up-tempo trainer, the Pro 4 is their conventional race day shoe, and then the Pro Evo 1 is their top-tier, super light and expensive racing shoe. The Pro 4 costs $250, which yes is expensive, but it's half the cost of the Pro Evo 1. The stack height remains unchanged with 39 millimeters in the heel and 33 in the forefoot for a 6 millimeter drop, again same as the Pro 3. However, the Pro 4 is going to be much lighter, roughly half an ounce, as it comes in at about 7.1 ounces for a US men's size 9, making this thing pretty darn light. The Pro 4 is a complete redesign, and that starts with the upper. It's a new material which they call microfit. It's a very soft and flexible type fabric, very thin as well. Doesn't feel plasticky or synthetic. I will say I was surprised by the fact that it's not that breathable. It's fairly kind of closed off, has a little bit of airflow, but not as breathable as you would think, which is fine in these colder months. But as we get into the spring and summer, I'm very curious to see how this performs or if that causes any issues. Now, as far as the fit goes, I would recommend maybe going up about half a size. Didn't have any aches or pains, but my toe was awfully close to the top of the toe box. There's a plastic toe guard which supports the upper, helps give you a little bit of room, but my toe was pretty darn close. So if you can go up half a size, I do think that would help. The tongue is paper thin and is attached directly to the upper in two very precise points. You can actually see where it is because you have this stitch mark on the lateral side and this other stitch mark on the medial side. So that kind of shows how they attach the tongue. Now, like I said, the tongue, paper thin, very, very minimal. However, you have some very light, and I do mean very light, padding down the center to help with lace pressure protection. I thought it got the job done. I didn't have to pull laces too tight, mainly because it has a fairly snug fit through the heel and midfoot. It's kind of difficult to get your foot in this shoe. And the other thing is they have something called light lock. So apparently there's a one-way stretch material or kind of aspect to this shoe. I was trying to figure out how it worked just by pulling around and kind of figuring out which way it was supposed to stretch or not stretch. I wasn't able to do it. So I just know it works. I'm not exactly sure how light lock works, but for me, my foot was very secure in this platform. And then for the start of the show, the heel counter, really impressed what they did here because of how minimal and flexible it is. It has a very thin layer of plastic that's quite strong, gives the heel counter some good structure, and they added another layer, kind of wraps around the heel counter and just kind of helps lock you in, gives it a nice level of security without being overly stiff and heavy. I do like this mainly because sometimes when you have these super minimal heel counters, I have a little bit of heel lift and it's hard to get a proper fit, and that is not the case here. You have a quite deep pocket to slide back into. And then you do have some light foam blocks across the top, fairly comfortable and all works together to give you a very secure feeling. A little bit difficult, like I said, to get your foot in the shoe, but once you're in, you are in. The midsole foam is still technically on paper Light Strike Pro. However, this formulation is different compared to what we saw last year on the Pro 3. I believe the midsole foam or the Light Strike Pro we see on the Evo SL is the same type we saw on the Pro 3, so a very similar experience there, while the Light Strike Pro we have here on the Pro 4 is going to be much softer and have a little bit more energy return to it on top of being lighter. And then with all those changes, they also made the midsole geometry different. The rocker geometry is now more aggressive. It starts 60% of the way through the shoe, giving you a very rapid toe off sensation. And of course, to stiffen up this really soft foam are the energy rods. I would rate this as incredibly stiff and rigid compared to some other stiffening elements that I've seen. So that is kind of the simple high level breakdown of this midsole, but the big story here is new aggressive rocker geometry, and then the midsole is significantly softer and bouncier. So how do all these updates affect the Pro 4's performance? Well, it definitely takes this shoe and shifts it into a much more aggressive stance. The shoe is lighter, softer, bouncier, and then the geometry is much more aggressive. So it loses a lot of its versatility. It's less stable, feels very kind of awkward, kind of like a baby deer walking at slower paces. But once you put the foot on the gas, this thing flies. I love how smooth it is, and the energy return is glorious. It's just a fun shoe to run in. This is probably my #1 racing shoe right now. I have a couple others I want to test out, but this will most likely be the shoe I'm using for a few upcoming efforts. Now, I think it'd be very interesting to see if you took this upper and put it with like a Pro 3 midsole, because when I take the Evo SL with its firmer version of Light Strike, this just feels a little bit more stable. You can use it for a wider variety of paces. I think to try the Pro 3, I would have loved to see what that was like. But again, based on my experience with this midsole, much more stable, easier to kind of take on a wide range of runs, where this is really just kind of geared for going fast and going fast only, just because it felt kind of weird and clunky when we try to slow it down. That's because of the rocker and the super soft foam. If we flip the shoe over, we have this cast polyurethane outsole substance, which is going to be a bit stickier and grippier compared to the Continental rubber we have as a patch in the top of the toe section. For me, it worked quite well, quite grippy. It really kind of hugs the ground very well. Something unique is if you look at the lateral part of the toe box, you have exposed foam. For me, it didn't have any wear on it, just a few light marks, so it doesn't seem like an issue for me, but it is a unique design choice. And if you go towards the rear of the shoe, you notice it had this large kind of cutout, and that's part of the reason I think the heel feels very soft on top of the formulation changing, is because it allows the foam to expand a bit more. And of course, you can see those carbon rods with a little cutout, which I think is kind of a cool aesthetic touch. At the end of the day, the Pro 4 shifts to becoming a much more aggressive and faster super race day shoe. It loses a lot of its versatility, and for someone who wants something that can really push the pace but also has a decent amount of pace range to it, then I really do think the Evo SL is going to be your friend. And especially $150, you get the Pro 3 Light Strike Pro formulation with a mid-foot TPU or plastic shank that stiffens it up, allows it to pick up the pace, but also is decently stable for having that super foam, where I think a lot of that stability has been lost with this very soft and squishy version of Light Strike Pro. I'm also curious to see how this durability holds up. I saw a lot of people say that the Pro 3 lasted them for forever, and when you have a softer foam, I think that typically means it's not going to be as durable. So we'll see. I'll just put a ton of miles into it and then report back. But for right now, this is probably one of my favorite racing shoes. Yes, you probably want to size up about half a size, and I'm very curious to see how this upper performs in the warmer months, just because it didn't have the best amount of airflow. And then I forgot to mention this earlier on in the review, but as a fun small fact, I love when companies do this. It's like a mini Easter egg. If you flip up the heel pull tab, it says "This too shall pass." So kind of a cool little touch by Adidas. Well, that concludes the review. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Pro 4, or are you going to go with the Evo SL, or are you one of those people that's going to bump it all the way up to the Pro Evo 1? I would love to hear from you. I'm Brian for Brian's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.